Imagine lying in a hospital bed, your heart failing, machines forcing each breath, and hearing your son say, "Mom's fine, we can't just leave my wife's party." In that moment, I realized a cruel truth. My life meant less to Isaac and Benjamin than champagne and appetizers. That night, the monitor kept beeping, but my mind was sharper than ever. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the hardest choice I ever made, walking away from the children I loved most to finally save myself. Now ask yourself, in my place, what would you have done? I remember every detail of that night, as if it's branded into my skin. The flashing red lights of the ambulance painted the ceiling as paramedics worked frantically, voices overlapping, telling me to stay with us. My chest felt like it was being crushed under 1,000 pounds, and yet, even in that haze of pain, my mind clung to one desperate hope. My boys will come. The doctors would call, and my sons, Isaac and Benjamin, would rush through the hospital doors, worried, panicked, desperate to see their mother still alive. That's how it's supposed to happen, isn't it? That's what family does. But instead, I lay there under the sterile glare of fluorescent lights, listening to the heart monitor sputter out a rhythm that could stop at any second, and I was alone. Truly, terrifyingly alone. The call had already been made. I didn't know it then, but later I would hear the exact words. Words that sliced through me like knives. Isaac, my firstborn, the child who once clung to my skirts and whispered that he'd never leave me, said to the doctor, "Mom's strong. She'll be fine. My wife's party has already started. We can't just abandon our guests." Imagine hearing that when your heart has already failed 3 times in the ambulance. Imagine lying there, tethered to machines, knowing that the people you sacrificed your entire life for were 30 minutes away, raising champagne glasses, laughing under chandeliers, eating canapes, while you hovered between life and death. The room smelled of disinfectant and metal, that cold hospital odor that makes you feel less human and more like a specimen. Each beep of the monitor seemed to echo louder than the last, reminding me that every second might be my final one. I tried to lift my hand to reach for the call button, but it trembled uncontrollably. It wasn't only the medication coursing through my veins, it was rage. Rage so sharp it felt like venom spreading through me. After years of recovering from abandonment, from backbreaking work, from betrayal and disappointment, this was the final wound. A soft voice pulled me back for a moment. "Mrs. Rosewood, please try to rest." Fiona, the night nurse, whispered like she was speaking to a child. She couldn't have been older than my daughters-in-law, yet there was more compassion in her gaze than I'd seen from my family in years. She adjusted the 4 gently, as if touch could somehow heal what medicine couldn't. The doctor had warned me just an hour earlier. The most important thing now is for you to stay calm. But how does one stay calm when your very existence has just been weighed against a party and lost? Dr. Miller told me what my sons had said, and his words still reverberated in my mind like hammer strikes. "I told them this could be your last night," he said, his tone grave. "I explained the heart attack was massive, that you had 3 cardiac arrests during transport, that we resuscitated you after being clinically dead for 4 minutes. And still they chose the party. 4 minutes. 4 minutes without breath, without heartbeat, without pulse. 4 minutes when I was gone from this world. And my children, my flesh and blood, were worried not about my last words or my final moments, but about Mela's carefully arranged pink decorations and Diana's shimmering golden dress. The weight of that truth pressed down on me harder than any heart attack. I stared at the closed hospital door, waiting, hoping it might open, that they might have a sudden change of heart, burst in, tears streaming down their faces, apologizing for their foolishness. But the hours crept by in silence. No footsteps. No calls. Not a single text message. Only the machines that kept me tethered to this world, and the echo of their dismissal ringing in my head. Fiona checked my vitals again. "Your blood pressure's a little high," she said softly, concern tightening her brow. "Are you thinking about something that makes you nervous?" If only she knew. If only she understood that it wasn't fear but 66 years of unconditional love suddenly crashing down in a tidal wave of betrayal. All those years of sacrifice, all the meals skipped so my boys could eat, all the nights sewing until my fingers bled, all the dreams abandoned. And in the end, my worth to them was less than a birthday cake and a rented ballroom. I looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, music played, glasses clinked, laughter echoed. Somewhere out there, my sons were basking in the glow of a party while their mother wondered if her next heartbeat would come. Something inside me cracked wide open. It wasn't my heart this time, it was something deeper. The last fragile strand of hope I'd held on to, the desperate belief that maybe, just maybe, I still mattered to them. It snapped in that hospital room, under the flickering fluorescent lights, while the world carried on outside. By the time the clock crept toward morning, I wasn't just fighting for air. I was fighting to accept a truth I never wanted to face. When it truly mattered, when my life was dangling by a thread, my children chose not to be there. They chose balloons, champagne, and applause over their mother's life. And in that devastating clarity, I realized something even more terrifying than death itself. I realized I had become disposable. I wasn't always this broken woman lying in a hospital bed, wondering where she had gone wrong. No, there was a time when I carried the world on my shoulders and refused to let it crush me, no matter how heavy it became. I can still remember the day my husband walked out. Robert packed a suitcase, slammed the door, and left me with 2 boys who were barely teenagers, a mortgage I couldn't afford, and a mountain of debt that threatened to bury us alive. I was 35 years old, scared and utterly alone. But I told myself I would recover. I had to. For Isaac. For Benjamin. Recovery meant sacrifice. I scrubbed office floors at dawn while the world was still sleeping. The smell of bleach clung to my hands long after I left those buildings. By 8, I was waiting tables at the diner downtown, balancing trays heavier than my arms could handle, smiling politely at strangers while exhaustion hollowed out my bones. And when night fell, I sat at the sewing machine, patching clothes for neighbors until my fingers bled, the hum of the needle lulling me into a state of numb survival. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, but my boys needed school books, shoes that fit, and food on the table. That was my currency of love, giving them everything, while I had nothing left for myself. The scars on my fingers never healed completely. Sometimes I glance at them and think of the hundreds of hours spent stitching fabric under a dim lamp, praying I wouldn't nod off and stab myself. Each stitch was a promise, a better future for Isaac, a better future for Benjamin. I never imagined those promises would one day unravel into resentment and abandonment. I still remember the little green house in Lakeside, the one with the tiny garden where the boys learned to ride their bikes. That house was more than walls and a roof. It was our sanctuary. Every corner told a story. The kitchen where I stretched pasta dough by hand, the living room where we huddled under blankets during winter blackouts, the doorframe where I etched their growing heights in pencil. When Isaac came to me, begging for help with the down payment on his own home, I sold that house without a second thought. "It's only temporary, Mom," he said. "I'll pay you back in 2 years. That was 8 years ago. I still wait for the repayment that will never come." And Benjamin, my sweet, ambitious Benjamin. He had big dreams, bigger than his wallet could handle. When he begged me for money to launch his business, I gave him everything I had. $28,000 I had saved penny by penny over decades. It was meant to be my safety net, my peace of mind for old age. "It's a safe investment, Mom," he promised. 6 months and I'll pay you back with interest." 3 months later, the business folded. My savings vanished like smoke, leaving nothing but his shrug and the words, "At least I tried." As if my sacrifice were nothing more than a gamble he had lost at a casino. But I told myself I could recover. I always recovered. I had recovered from worse, hadn't I? At least that's what I whispered when the bitterness clawed at me. Even their wives found ways to remind me of my place. Mela, with her perfect nails and rehearsed smile, humiliated me last Christmas in front of everyone. "That olive green dress, Cecilia, it isn't appropriate for the occasion. You should really dress your age." My cheeks burned as the room filled with awkward silence, and my sons said nothing. Not one word of defense. And Diana, with her gentle poison, slowly stripped away my traditions piece by piece. Sunday dinners, once sacred, were dismissed as too much work. She insisted takeout was easier. My lasagna, the dish I perfected for decades, was suddenly too heavy, too old-fashioned. Piece by piece, they dismantled everything that made me feel like a mother, like part of a family. Invitations dwindled. At first, excuses, too much homework for the kids, Diana wasn't feeling well, Isaac had a deadline. Eventually, the excuses weren't needed. They stopped inviting me altogether. My neighbor Linda saw what I refused to see. She looked me in the eyes one afternoon and said, "Cecilia, your daughters-in-law are pushing you away. They're cutting the cord between you and your boys." I shook my head, insisted they just needed time. But deep down, I knew she was right. And still, I carried on. I recovered when I swallowed their dismissals. I recovered when I wore the same gray dress for years so my boys could have soccer lessons, guitar lessons, new sneakers when their feet outgrew the old ones. I recovered when I pawned my wedding ring to pay for Benjamin's textbooks. I recovered when Isaac forgot my birthday, year after year, too busy with business dinners and social events. But here's the truth. You can only recover so many times before something inside you shatters for good. And as I lay in that hospital bed, machines keeping my heart alive, I realized all those years of recovery had been preparing me for this moment. This wasn't just about lost money, or forgotten birthdays, or cutting remarks. This was different. This was about the one thing I could never recover from. The knowledge that when my life truly hung by a thread, my children chose to toast at a party instead of holding my hand. I thought back to the nights I worked until sunrise, the days I starved so they could eat, the dreams I buried so they could chase theirs. All of it, every sacrifice, funneled into sons who, in the end, decided I was less important than champagne flutes and pink decorations. And in that unbearable clarity, I finally saw my life for what it was, not a story of endless recovery, but a story of love unreturned. When Isaac first brought Mayla to meet me, I knew something in our lives was about to shift. She walked into my modest apartment with the air of someone appraising property, her eyes scanning the furniture, the curtains, the worn rug that had seen 2 decades of laughter and spilled milk. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never touched her eyes. "Cecilia," she said smoothly, "don't you think it would be better if Isaac and I spent Christmas at my family's home this year? We have such strong traditions, and my mother, well, she's used to doing things a certain way." I nodded politely, though my heart cracked a little. That Christmas, for the first time in 25 years, I ate dinner alone. The turkey I had saved up to buy sat untouched in the fridge until it spoiled. When Isaac returned afterward, his face was lit up with excitement. "Mom, it was amazing. Mayla's house is spectacular." The dining room looked like a magazine spread, and her mom, "Wow, she's a great cook." I smiled weakly, pretending his words didn't pierce me, as though 30 years of meals I had prepared with aching hands suddenly meant nothing. That was the first fracture. Small but deep. Benjamin followed a similar path years later. When he introduced me to Diana, I thought she was kinder, gentler. And perhaps she was, at least on the surface. Her words weren't sharp blades like Mayla's. No, Diana preferred soft daggers disguised as compliments. "Oh, Cecilia, what a lovely red sweater. So vintage. I keep telling Benjamin women our age should update their wardrobes every now and then." She laughed lightly, but the meaning sank heavy in my chest. Another time, after tasting my lasagna, the recipe I had perfected through decades of trial and error, she smiled politely and said, "It's good, though maybe a little heavy. I prefer lighter, more modern dishes." Benjamin has gotten used to my style. Each remark was small, but they collected over time like raindrops filling a basin. Before long, I was drowning in them. And the boys? They said nothing. Isaac sat silently while Mayla criticized the color of my dress at Christmas dinner. Benjamin stared at his plate while Diana suggested ordering takeout instead of coming to my home for Sunday meals. Silence, always silence. That silence became a weapon sharper than any insult. It told me their loyalty had shifted. No longer to the mother who had built their world from scratch, but to the wives who now dictated the terms of family life. Invitations grew scarce. At first, it was excuses. Diana wasn't feeling well, Isaac had late meetings, the children had too much homework. But soon, the excuses disappeared. The invitations simply stopped coming. Sunday dinners, once sacred, once filled with laughter, the smell of garlic bread, the clink of glasses, were erased from the calendar. I still remember the sting of standing by my window, watching cars fill their driveways on holidays while mine remained empty. My neighbor Linda would come by, coffee in hand, and her honesty cut through the fog of my denial. "Cecilia, dear, I've seen this before. Your daughters-in-law are pushing you away. It's the oldest story in the book." I shook my head, insisted they just needed time to adjust. "They're good girls," I said. "They'll come around." Linda just gave me a sad smile. "Cecilia, it's been years. They've adapted just fine to a life without you in it." But I clung to hope, even as evidence piled up. I bought thoughtful gifts, only to see them set aside. I baked their favorite desserts, only to be told they were too rich, too outdated. I even tried to fit in with their world, bought a modern blouse I couldn't afford, styled my hair differently, practiced holding my tongue at dinners. But nothing worked. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was an accessory they could bring out when convenient, or hide away when I embarrassed them. Mayla made sure to keep control, always planning the holidays at her family's mansion, where everything sparkled, where my presence felt like a smudge on their perfect photograph. She once looked me in the eye and said, "Isaac deserves the best, Cecilia. That's why I work so hard to give him everything." As if I hadn't spent decades breaking my back to give him everything I had. Diana's control was quieter, subtler, but no less effective. She encouraged Benjamin to think of my traditions as outdated, my ways as inconvenient. Soon he was parroting her words. "Mom, you work too hard for those Sunday dinners. It's easier for everyone if we just order takeout. Easier for everyone, or easier for Diana." The final blow came when I overheard Benjamin on the phone one night. He thought I was asleep in the next room, but I heard every word. "Yeah, we didn't invite Mom. You know how she is, always giving her opinions. It's just easier without her." I sat frozen in the dark, my hands trembling, the words echoing in my skull. Always giving her opinions. That was my crime. Loving them too loudly, caring too much, refusing to fade quietly into the background. By then, I realized Linda was right. My role had been rewritten without my consent. No longer mother, no longer the center of their world. I had become an afterthought. A guest in the lives I had sacrificed everything to build. And yet, even knowing all this, I told myself I could recover. I always did. But sitting in that hospital bed, remembering every humiliation, every cut disguised as kindness, I finally saw the truth. Those years of slow exclusion weren't just coincidences. They were the rehearsal for the night my children would prove, once and for all, that I no longer mattered. It was my 66th birthday, though you wouldn't have known it by looking at my family. No balloons. No flowers. Not even a card. Isaac invited me to his house that Sunday, but it wasn't for me. It was just another ordinary lunch, a salad and some grilled chicken Mela had thrown together. Nothing like the celebrations I used to create when they were little. The cakes I baked from scratch, the streamers I hung across the living room, the way I saved every extra penny to buy them one special gift. We sat around the polished oak table, the clinking of forks against plates filling the silence. I tried to smile, tried to ignore the weight in my chest that had been pressing harder each night at exactly 3 a.m, waking me as though something, or someone, were sitting on my ribs. Benjamin glanced at me briefly and said, "Mom, you look tired. Are you sleeping well?" His eyes never left his phone screen, his fingers scrolling mindlessly. I wanted to tell him the truth, that my sleep was broken by pain I couldn't explain, that sometimes it felt like a giant band tightening around my torso, stealing my breath. But I swallowed the words and said, "I'm fine, honey. Just a little heartburn." Mela laughed, sharp and dismissive. At our age, food doesn't sit the same way. I tell my mom she has to cut back on spices and fat. You should too, Cecilia. A 66-year-old body isn't like a 30-year-old's. Her tone was casual, but every word cut. I looked down at my plate of dry chicken and limp salad leaves, feeling my birthday dissolve into nothing more than another reminder of my age, my irrelevance. As I gathered my purse to leave, the door opened and Diana swept in, glowing with excitement. "Guess what?" she announced, setting her designer bag on the counter. "We finally got a date for my birthday party. Wednesday, at the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom." Her voice was bright, thrilled, as if she had just won the lottery. I froze. Wednesday. Just 3 days after my birthday, my real birthday, the one no one had even acknowledged. "I've been planning for months," Diana continued, not even pausing to notice my silence. "The best catering service, live music, themed decorations. Over 50 guests confirmed. It's going to be amazing." Benjamin smiled proudly and added, "I bought her this gorgeous golden dress. Cost $1,200, but worth every penny." He looked at Diana like she was the sun. $1,200. More than I spent on clothes in 2 years. No one mentioned that Sunday was my birthday. No one asked if I had plans. No one even noticed the tears burning behind my eyes as Diana described the champagne fountains and the imported cake. Instead, the message was clear. Their lives had room for grand parties, designer gowns, and endless praise, but not for me. That evening, as I returned to my small apartment, the pain in my chest grew sharper, heavier. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was indigestion, maybe stress. But by Tuesday night, the pressure was unbearable. It spread down my left arm, wrapped around my neck, gnawed at my back like fire. I curled on the bed, clutching my chest, sweat dripping cold across my forehead. At 11, desperate, I called Isaac. "Son," I whispered, struggling for breath. "I feel very sick. My chest." He sighed. "Mom, we're watching a movie. Did you take chamomile tea? It's probably stress. You've been tense with all this party talk." We'll stop by tomorrow after the celebration, okay? Tomorrow. Tomorrow when it might be too late. I hung up, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I had ever been in my life. Even my pain had to wait until after the party. At 5 in the morning, unable to bear it any longer, I called Linda. She rushed over, panic in her voice as I described the symptoms. "My dear, that sounds like a heart attack," she said firmly. "We're going to the hospital now." "No, Linda. Today is Diana's party. I don't want to ruin." She cut me off, her eyes blazing. "Ruin what?" "Cecilia, your life is on the line. Do you think a party matters more than that?" But for my children it did. That truth sank into me like ice. Linda half carried me to the cab, her hand gripping mine as the pain twisted deeper. Each bump on the road felt like knives stabbing my chest. "Hang on," she whispered. "We're almost there." In the emergency room, everything blurred, bright lights shouted orders, the rush of nurses and doctors. An ECG confirmed the worst. Elevated enzymes, irregular heartbeat. "You're having a massive heart attack," Dr. Miller said gravely. "We need to operate immediately. Is there anyone we should call?" "Close family." With tears in my eyes and agony shredding my body, I gave him my son's numbers. "Please tell them it's urgent. Tell them they must come now." Linda squeezed my hand, refusing to leave as they wheeled me toward the operating room. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I'll stay here until you come out." But I was alone. As the anesthesia pulled me under, the last thought in my mind was the sound of laughter and music echoing from Diana's ballroom, while I lay dying. When I woke from surgery, the room was dim except for the steady glow of monitors. My chest burned, wrapped in bandages, every breath a reminder that I had crossed the line between life and death and somehow returned. The first words out of my mouth weren't about the pain or the tubes tangled around me. They were a question. "Did my sons come?" Fiona, the night nurse, hesitated. Her hands paused as she adjusted the 4. The silence told me the truth before her lips did. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Rosewood. The doctor called them, explained everything. They said they couldn't come right away." Couldn't come right away. I closed my eyes, and Dr. Miller's earlier words echoed like hammer strikes in my skull. He had called them himself, his voice heavy with urgency. "Your mother's heart has failed. She was clinically dead for 4 minutes. If you want to see her alive, you must come now." And what was Isaac's answer? "Mom's strong. She'll recover. We can't leave in the middle of Diana's party." Benjamin's was worse. "Doctor, she can wait until tomorrow. Diana planned this for weeks. Guests already arrived. My mom has always recovered from everything." Recovered. Always recovered. As if I were a machine that could be rebooted at will. As if decades of sacrifice, of clawing back from disaster after disaster, were guarantees I could outlast even death itself. While they toasted with champagne, while cameras flashed in the Grand Plaza ballroom, I lay on a table surrounded by masked surgeons, my chest cracked open, my life balanced on a scalpel's edge. My blood spilled under the bright surgical lights while my children laughed under chandeliers. The contrast seared itself into my memory. I could almost hear the faint strains of live music drifting across the city, even through the beeping monitors. Glasses clinking against each other. Cheers. Applause. And here there was only the hiss of oxygen, the metallic scent of blood, the whir of machines forcing my body to keep going. Hours passed. Still no calls. Still no footsteps in the hall. Not even a text. I stared at the closed door, willing it to open, praying for the sound of hurried shoes and frantic voices. Nothing. The silence was louder than any alarm. Fiona tried to comfort me, her voice gentle, her touch warm. "Your vitals are stabilizing, Mrs. Rosewood. That's what matters." But she didn't know what truly mattered. What mattered was that when the choice was between me and a party, the party won. I thought of the balloons Diana must have ordered, pink and gold, floating above glossy tables. I imagined the cake, 3 tiers, maybe 4, decorated with sugar roses, costing hundreds of dollars. I pictured Mela adjusting her dress, Benjamin flashing his rehearsed smile at important clients, Isaac mingling with guests, pretending he had no dying mother in a hospital bed across town. And I realized something I had never admitted before. I wasn't just absent from their celebration. I had been erased. Erased from their lives, their priorities, their stories. For them, my existence was not urgent, not essential. I was background noise like static on the radio, easy to ignore, even in my final hour. Dr. Miller visited in the early morning, exhaustion lining his face. He looked at me with the solemnity of a man who has seen too much. "Mrs. Rosewood, you're lucky to be alive. The truth is, you shouldn't have made it." Your body endured 3 cardiac arrests. That kind of strain leaves scars. Scars. Not just on my heart, but on my soul. Because while he spoke, his words carried an unspoken weight. Your sons knew. And they chose not to be here. I turned my face toward the window, where city lights flickered faintly against the dark. Somewhere in that glittering skyline, my children were still celebrating. They would stumble into bed full of wine and laughter, never knowing that while they danced, I had stood at death's door. A nurse entered briefly, checking my drip. She offered me water, but my mouth still tasted metallic, like pennies and salt, a cruel reminder of how close I had come to never tasting anything again. And all the while, anger coiled inside me, hot and steady. This wasn't grief anymore. Grief implies love still lingers. No, this was rage. Rage that all my sacrifices, the jobs, the sleepless nights, the house sold, the savings drained, amounted to so little in their eyes. Rage that I had been strong for so long that they mistook my strength for immortality. Rage that when the moment finally came for them to give back even a fraction of what I had poured into them, they chose to raise glasses at a party. By dawn, the fury inside me had crystallized into something cold, unshakable. A truth too sharp to ignore. This was not just another wound I could recover from. This was the betrayal that ended all recovery. Because once you realize your life matters less to your children than a decorated ballroom, there's no stitching that tear back together. When the door finally opened the next day, I braced myself for tears, for apologies, for the embrace I had craved through every torturous hour of the night. But instead, Benjamin walked in with Diana at his side, her golden earrings gleaming as if she were still basking in the glow of her triumph. She smiled, practiced and polite. "Mother-in-law, what a scare you gave us. Imagine, right on the night of my party. Such bad luck. Bad luck." As if my heart had chosen to fail simply to inconvenience her. Benjamin sat down in the farthest chair, his phone still in hand. "Mom, the party was incredible. You should have seen it," Diana outdid herself. Over 60 people came, including her boss and several important clients. It was a huge success. His voice carried pride, excitement, the same tone he once used when he brought home good grades. But this time, his triumph came at the cost of my life. I stared at him, searching his face for even a flicker of remorse, a sign that maybe he realized what had been at stake. Instead, he tapped his phone screen, scrolling through photos. He showed me one of Diana in her shimmering dress, glowing under the ballroom lights. Doesn't she look amazing? The contrast nearly broke me. While I lay unconscious with tubes down my throat, he was admiring centerpieces and dresses. My eyes burned with tears, but I refused to let them fall. Isaac arrived later, trailed by Mela, who adjusted her designer jacket, as if she were walking into a business meeting rather than her mother-in-law's hospital room. Isaac kissed my forehead lightly, almost perfunctorily. "Mom, you look much better than we expected. The doctor says you'll recover. You've always been strong. Strong. Always strong." As though my strength absolved them of the responsibility to care. Diana leaned against the bed rail, her tone breezy. "See, we told the doctor you'd be fine. He exaggerated. We wouldn't have been useful at the hospital anyway. We're not doctors. Better for us to stay where we could be helpful." Helpful. By pouring champagne and mingling with guests while my heart stopped 3 times. I whispered, my voice raw. I was clinically dead for 4 minutes. Benjamin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, but it's over now. The important thing is you're alive and recovering. The important thing." I repeated the words in my head like a curse. The important thing to them wasn't that their mother had almost died. It was that their party hadn't been interrupted. I looked from one face to another, waiting for guilt, for shame, for anything that would tell me I still mattered. Instead, Diana frowned slightly. "It isn't fair to make us feel guilty. We didn't know it was that serious. And you can't expect us to cancel our lives every time you have a health issue. We have responsibilities, commitments. Every time I have a health issue. As if a massive heart attack were a cold, a trivial inconvenience. I forced myself to breathe steadily, though my chest ached with more than just pain from the surgery. "You're right," I said finally, my tone calm, too calm. "You shouldn't feel guilty." Relief washed over their faces, as though they believed the matter settled. "Because to feel guilty you need a conscience," I continued, my voice sharpening, "and you clearly lost yours a long time ago." The room froze. Diana's smile faltered. Benjamin frowned. Isaac looked at the floor. "Mom, that's unfair," Benjamin snapped. "We explained why we couldn't come earlier. The party was important for our future. And I said coldly, was apparently not important for yours. Mela crossed her arms, her voice clipped. Boundaries are healthy in family relationships. You can't expect to be at the center of our lives forever. Boundaries. That's what they called it, pushing me out, replacing me with obligations and excuses. They stayed another 10 minutes, mostly talking among themselves about weekend plans, about a vacation they were planning, about a rug Diana wanted for her living room. I sat silently watching, listening, realizing something inside me had broken completely. It wasn't my heart this time. It was hope. The last fragile thread connecting me to the illusion that I still mattered. When they finally stood to leave, they offered vague promises. We'll stop by once a week, maybe Sundays after lunch. Call us if it's urgent, but not during work hours, of course. Once a week. If nothing else was more important. As the door closed behind them, the room plunged back into sterile silence. Fiona entered, checking my vitals. She looked at me closely. Your blood pressure spiked. Are you okay? I met her gaze, and for the first time, I answered honestly. No, Fiona. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. And in that moment, clarity washed over me. My breaking point had arrived. I would no longer be the mother who begged for scraps of attention, who accepted crumbs of love. I had carried my sons all my life. Now it was time to put them down. That night, the hospital was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes in the corridor. Sleep would not come. Not after what had happened. I had reached the breaking point, and now there was no turning back. For decades, I had carried the weight of being the strong one, the one who always recovered, the one who sacrificed in silence. But lying in that bed, my chest stitched together, my heart still weak from failing 3 times, I realized strength was not the same as love. And whatever love I had once believed my sons held for me had withered long ago. I asked Fiona for paper and a pen. She looked at me with surprise, but handed them over without hesitation. Are you going to write letters? She asked softly. Something like that, I whispered. I need to put my thoughts in order. The words poured out of me faster than I could write, as if they had been waiting, festering for years. My hand trembled, the ink blotting in places, but still I wrote. Dear Isaac and Benjamin, for 66 years I lived for you. Every decision, every sacrifice, every dream I abandoned was for your well-being and happiness. Today, after being clinically dead for 4 minutes, I finally understand. You have not lived a single day thinking about mine. Tears smudged the page, but I continued, determined. I told them of the years after their father left, how I was only 35 and still had suitors, chances to remarry, chances to build a new life. But I refused them all, afraid any man might make my sons feel like burdens. I chose to remain alone so that they would never doubt they were my priority. I gave up companionship, more children, even love itself for you, I wrote. I described the endless nights working 3 jobs, sleeping barely 3 hours. Cleaning offices before dawn, waiting tables until afternoon, sewing until midnight. My hands carry scars that never healed. Every stitch was for you. Every coin saved was for you. Then the sacrifices that cut deepest. Selling the little green house that had held our memories, the house with pencil marks on the doorframe where I measured their growth. I sold it for Isaac's down payment, moving into a cramped apartment so he could have his dream. Later, draining my life savings, $28,000 I had saved over decades, for Benjamin's doomed business. That money was my safety for old age, my protection from becoming a burden. Yet I gave it all to you. And what did you give me? Excuses. Silence. Abandonment. The anger in my words surged, but beneath it lay sorrow, sorrow too heavy to bear. I reminded them of smaller humiliations, too. The olive dress mocked by Mela, the lasagna dismissed by Diana, the Sunday dinners erased. One slight after another, 1,000 paper cuts until the bleeding was invisible but unending. I recovered every time. Or so I thought. But this betrayal, I cannot recover from. Because while I was dying, you were laughing with guests. While machines fought to keep me alive, you lifted champagne glasses. My pen scratched furiously as I wrote the truth I had long denied. You do not love me. Perhaps you once did, as children needing protection. But now I am only an obligation, a box to check, a nuisance to be managed. And I will no longer beg for crumbs of affection from those who see me as less than a party decoration. I paused, wiping my face, catching my breath. My heart raced, but it wasn't fear. It was release. Liberation. That is why I have made a decision, I wrote. When you read this letter, I will already be gone from your lives. Do not look for me, you will not find me. I am not leaving out of anger, but out of self-love, the The same love I poured into you for decades, I will finally give to myself. I deserve people who value me, who choose me, not because of duty but because of love. My hand cramped, but I pressed on. You had every chance to show me I mattered. And when the moment came, you chose a party instead. I will not forgive that. I will not forget it. This is my final goodbye. Be happy with your busy lives and glittering celebrations. I will be happy far away from you. I signed my full name, Cecilia Rosewood, beneath the final lines, my signature shaky but resolute. Folding the paper, I slid it into an envelope and wrote their names on the front. The white envelope looked small, almost fragile, but I knew it carried more weight than any words I had ever spoken to them. For the first time in years, my chest felt lighter. Not healed, but freed. I placed the letter in the drawer beside my bed and lay back, exhausted but strangely at peace. Tomorrow, Linda would come. Tomorrow, I would tell her everything. As sleep finally crept in, I whispered to myself, "It's not my heart that failed tonight. It's my hope. And now I choose me." The morning sun bled pale light across the hospital blinds when I made my decision final. I had written the letter, confessed every wound, carved my truth onto the page. Now it was time to act. Time to leave. Linda arrived mid-morning, a thermos of coffee in her hand, her eyes filled with worry. She had been there through every storm, and she knew, before I spoke, that something in me had shifted. "You've reached your limit, haven't you?" she asked softly. I nodded. My voice trembled, but my resolve did not. "I can't live this way anymore, Linda. If I stay, I'll die, not from my heart, but from the loneliness." I wrote them a letter. "When they read it, I'll be gone." Her hand tightened over mine. "Then let me help you." The plan began simply. Linda contacted Fiona, the kind nurse who had seen my despair and understood without judgment. That evening, when the ward quieted and most visitors had gone, Fiona slipped into my room carrying a small folder. Inside were papers, documents I never thought I'd need. A medical proxy giving me authority over my own discharge. A signed clearance, discreetly handled by a sympathetic doctor who believed in my right to choose freedom. "If you sign these," Fiona whispered, "you can walk out without anyone stopping you. It'll look official. Are you sure this is what you want?" I gripped the pen tightly. My hand shook, not from fear but from release. With each signature, I felt chains snapping one by one. By the last stroke of ink, I was no longer a prisoner of obligation. Linda handled the money. For years, I had tucked away small amounts from sewing jobs, babysitting gigs, the odd tailoring requests that still trickled in. It wasn't much, but Linda had kept it safe for me, in an envelope hidden in her kitchen drawer. Now she handed it back. Nearly $4,000. Enough to buy a bus ticket, pay rent for a month, and start again somewhere far from the shadow of betrayal. That night, I packed what little I owned into a small duffel bag Linda brought. A few clothes, my Bible, and a photo of the boys when they were small, before life hardened their hearts, before wives and parties and excuses. I stared at that photo for a long time, my thumb brushing over their young faces. Then, with deliberate care, I slid it into the bottom of the bag. A reminder of what I had given, but no longer a reason to stay. We waited until midnight. The corridors grew quiet, the nurse's station occupied by laughter and paperwork. Fiona gave a small nod. "Now," she whispered. She placed a plain white envelope on my pillow, the letter to Isaac and Benjamin. "When they come, they'll find this." Every step out of that room felt surreal, like walking through a dream. The sterile smell of disinfectant faded behind me. The elevator doors closed with a soft hiss, and when they opened on the ground floor, I felt like I was stepping into another life. Linda's old sedan was waiting at the curb. The night air was cool, filled with the faint scent of rain. She helped me into the passenger seat, her hand lingering on mine. "Where do you want to go?" I had thought about this for days. "Dallas," I said finally. My cousin Hope lived there, a woman I hadn't seen in years, but who had once written me letters full of warmth and longing for reconnection. She had always said, "If you ever need a place, Cecilia, come to me." We drove in silence to the bus station. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Inside, the station smelled of coffee and diesel, the promise of escape humming in the air. Linda bought the ticket for me, pressing it into my hand. "You don't owe them your life anymore," she said firmly. "This time, live for yourself." When the bus pulled up, I hugged her tightly, tears spilling freely for the first time in years. "Thank you," I whispered. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, Cecilia. You saved yourself. I just stood beside you while you did it." I climbed aboard, the duffel heavy in my lap, the seat cold against my back. As the engine roared to life, I looked out the window one last time. The city stretched behind me, its glittering lights masking all the wounds it held. Somewhere across town, Isaac and Benjamin slept soundly, still basking in the afterglow of a successful party. They would wake tomorrow to find me gone, to read the letter I had left behind, to realize too late what they had thrown away. The bus pulled onto the highway, the city shrinking in the rearview mirror. My chest still ached, but it was no longer only from my heart. It was the ache of rebirth, the painful beauty of starting again. For the first time in decades, I felt free. I whispered into the darkness, words no one but I could hear. I lost my children, but I found myself. The bus rolled into Dallas just as the morning sun climbed above the horizon, spilling gold across the windows. I stepped down onto the platform with trembling legs, clutching my small duffel as if it were a lifeline. The air felt different here, warmer, lighter, like it carried the scent of new beginnings. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by the weight of sacrifice or the shadow of abandonment. I was simply Cecilia. Hope was waiting for me, exactly as she had promised on the phone. Her hair was silver now, her frame smaller, but her smile was wide and real. She rushed forward, wrapping me in an embrace that made my ribs ache yet soothed a part of me that had been starving. "You're home now, cousin," she said softly. And for the first time in decades, I believed those words. Her house was filled with sunlight and the scent of jasmine from her backyard garden. She showed me a room with crisp sheets and curtains that danced with the breeze. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted. That night, as I lay in that lavender-scented bed, I realized something astonishing. I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like I belonged. The days that followed unfolded like chapters of a book I had never thought I'd get to read. Hope introduced me to her circle of friends, women my age who laughed loudly, walked in the park every morning, and spoke of books, cooking, even painting. They welcomed me as though I'd been missing from their table all along. I joined a community art class at the cultural center, paintbrush in hand, my fingers shaky at first but steadier each day. Each canvas became a reminder that I could still create, that life wasn't over just because my children had decided they were done with me. I found work too, nothing grand, just a few shifts at a small boutique where my eye for detail and patience with customers mattered. The owner, a kind widow named Clara, paid me modestly but treated me with respect. That respect was worth more than the dollars in my pocket. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. Every so often, my phone buzzed with missed calls and messages from Isaac and Benjamin. At first, they were angry, demanding. Then pleading, bargaining. Eventually, they turned desperate. "Mom, please. We'll do better. Just tell us where you are." But I stayed silent. Forgiveness might come one day, but forgetting would not. And returning was impossible. One evening, sitting under Hope's lemon tree with a cup of tea, I realized something powerful. I had lost my role as their mother, but I had gained something much greater. The role of being myself. I was no longer measured by how much I gave away, by how much I sacrificed, or how well I endured neglect. I was measured by my own joy, my own choices, my own freedom. 6 months passed, and on my 67th birthday, Hope and my new friends threw a small party in her backyard. There were no expensive decorations, no designer dresses, no guests pretending to be impressed. There was laughter, music from an old radio, and a homemade cake with imperfect frosting. And yet, as I blew out the candles, I felt more celebrated, more loved, than I had in years. I stood up, raised my glass, and made a promise to myself. The rest of my life belongs to me. And that is where my story truly begins, not with betrayal, but with rebirth. I am Cecilia, a woman who finally chose herself over the illusion of family loyalty. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever sacrificed until nothing remained, hear me when I say this. It is never too late to walk away. It is never too late to live. So now, I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed, clinging to crumbs of affection? Or would you have dared, as I did, to step into the unknown and reclaim your dignity? If my story touched you, don't let it end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know what you would have chosen. Like this video if you believe every person deserves respect, no matter their age, no matter their sacrifices. And subscribe because there are countless more stories of survival, courage, and rebirth waiting to be told. Your support means the world. It helps keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us of one undeniable truth. Family is not always blood. Sometimes it's the people who see you, value you, and stand by you when the rest of the world turns away. Tonight, as I sit beneath the Dallas sky, the jasmine blooming at my window, I smile. Not the smile of a woman abandoned, but the smile of a woman reborn. My children may have chosen a party over my life, but I chose something greater, my freedom. And for me, that choice was everything. In the end, I realized losing my children wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of finally living it on my own terms. Sometimes the greatest act of love is the love you finally give yourself.